This is from South LA, and this is a slide of the 7 largest high schools, 7 kind of classic public high schools in South LA, and where they were in 1981, 1982 in terms of demographics. So for example, Crenshaw was 99% African American, Jordan 90% African American, Locke was 98% African American. Here's where they were in 2004, 2005. With the group that's coming down there, they're Latinos. So if you just look at Locke, can you back up? If you back up to, yeah, there you go. If you look at Locke, for example, it was 98% African American, about 2% Latino. Manual arts, about 2/3 African American, 1/3 Latino. Watch what happens. Move to the next slide. Yeah, you can see this huge dramatic change. In part, this is a shift within. In part, it's simply an increase in the number of students going there. Negotiating that change is very important, and it's one that's going to require that both populations learn to understand each other a little bit better, and then in particular the Latino population not mistake numeric growth for a sense of triumphalism. And this is incredibly important if you think about the kind of cultural dislocations that occur in a high school where you've had this huge demographic change. How do you bridge this? One little point about this, and then I'll come to a conclusion. Turns out there were 37 white students in these schools in 1981, 1982. In 2004, 2005, there were 37 white students. We think they're the same students. And we're launching a research program. If there's any funders in the room, it's called Leave No White Child Behind. It'll be an unfunded mandate. If we could go to the next slide. So the thing we need to know is, are these groups learning to lead together in our programs? And this is a picture at the bottom of Community Coalition based in South LA, which is doing just a stellar job of bringing young African American and Latino students together around getting more college prep classes and other sorts of things. Next slide. And we need to understand that conflict and collaboration can go together. There's a tendency to just focus in on we need to collaborate. And I'm a big guy on collaboration, but we also need to understand that change sometimes happens out of conflict, and it often only looks good at the end. We have, of course, a national holiday, Martin Luther King Day, in which just about everybody gets up and says, now, Martin Luther King, he was a swell guy, right? People didn't think he was a swell guy when he was alive. They thought that he was a troublemaker, lifting up the rock that was uncovering our racial history, that was shining a spotlight on issues of social and racial injustice, and who was trying to provoke us into action. He made us uncomfortable about race, he made us uncomfortable about poverty, he made us uncomfortable about the war that we were engaged in at the time. And we need to realize that this has to be done artfully, but it also has to be done in a way that creates change. Next slide. We are in some very unusual times and an uncommon challenge. Those of you who think that what will happen, there's going to be this debate about the stimulus package, but what's really going on beneath all this is a fundamental reshaping of the role of government to the economy, of the balance of power between different social forces. We're in some really fundamental and deep times, and we can talk a little bit more about that, but I'm being conscious of the time. So last slide and last thought. So we need to learn how to lead, and I think that we also need to learn how to tell ourselves a different story about who we are and about how we come together to make a change. And I've been ending a lot of speeches recently with this story, so I'll end this one too. And it's a story like, for many people like me, that begins not with me, but a generation earlier with my father. My father, who is 93 years old, and not too far away from here, he lives in Whittier, came to the United States in the 1930s with papers that were imperfect. When World War II came, he was given a choice between being deported or joining the US Army to fight in Europe. He couldn't figure out what to do. So he gave a coin, a penny, to my cousin Carlitos, who flipped it. The penny came up a particular way. My dad put it in his pocket. He went to the war. He and the penny came back safe. And a generation later, his son is a professor at the University of Southern California, which would even be better if I could get you football tickets, but still. It's quite an achievement.
We're getting a car.
And, yes, she's still pulling out for the car, right? Okay. And that's a great story. That's an American story. It's a California story. And it's the wrong story. It's the wrong story because when it's told that way, what it sounds like is an individual family and their ganas or desires, ganas we say in Spanish, to get ahead. If they worked hard, they got ahead. And my dad worked hard, my mom worked hard, we got ahead. But my dad in the 1930s was here without papers, but supported by a union so that he could make a decent wage. And when he left the war, he had a GI Bill, which meant that he could gain entry to education and also the opportunity to buy a house, which we did, or he did, in La Puente, an inner-ring suburb in the San Gabriel Valley. And with that GI Bill, and with a vibrant community college system, he went to LA Trade Tech, where he learned about electricity, a subject that still baffles me. And he learned to become an air conditioner repairman, and he went from being a janitor to being an air conditioner repairman, and we went from being poor to being working class. And I went to public schools in La Puente when they were decent because we were investing in them. And I got a chance to go to the University of California, Santa Cruz, because there was, in the 60s and 70s, affirmative action to take a chance on a kid like me that did not fit the usual profile. And that, I would submit to you, is the American story. It is a story. It is a story of individuals, and we should never put that side of our story to one side. But it is also a story of the social institutions and public policies that we put in place so that individuals can succeed. And it is a story of the social movements, the labor movement, the veterans movement that made sure that veterans were treated decently, the civil rights movement that opened up the doors to the University of California, the education movement that made sure that there was a decent public education system out. That's the American story. It's a story of movements, it's a story of public policies, it's a story of public institutions that make it possible for people to realize their dream. And if we tell that story, we can begin to reconnect these generations and make us think about the investments we need to have in place so that the youth that you serve realize their dreams and that California, once again, realizes its dream. Thank you.